Those that are bilingual, what have you heard from others that don't realize you can understand them? I'm French. I was in NYC, on top of the Empire State Building, and a young couple was standing next to me admiring the view. The guy turns to his GF and says in French, "AHH, I need to shit so bad." I couldn't not laugh. I grew up in Thailand and can speak fluent Thai, but I'm mixed race, so I look pretty white. This happened when I was about 14 and wearing red lipstick for the first time. I was coming home on the SkyTrain. This older lady turned to her husband and basically said that foreigners always dress like sluts and that she feels sorry for my parents for raising such a degenerate. Luckily my Thai mom called to ask which station I had gotten to, so I was just talking to her in perfect Thai. The woman's face was priceless. I kinda wish I had some witty retort before I got off the train, but I was really shy and didn't really stand up for myself at that age. Had a customer speaking Korean and I heard them say the coffee was good and I said thank you in Korean. They were super nice and tipped more than I thought they should have. I was working downtown, in the US, in a part of the city that is mainly tourists, and waited on a Chinese family one day. The restaurant is the equivalent of a sit-down chain like Olive Garden. I greeted them in English and they responded in English, so I figured that this would be the best method of communication since they did not ask if I spoke Cantonese. Once I moved on to my next table, I heard the mother tell the father that it is such a shame that my parents worked so hard for me to not speak Cantonese and work at a restaurant. I went through the whole meal speaking in English, and at the end, as I was handing them the bill, I said in Cantonese that it was a pleasure serving you and I hope you come again soon. The mother's face dropped and she thanked me profusely and left a decent tip. I might speak English well, but I also know how to work the Chinese guild. Edit. Thank you for my first gold. In high school I spoke Spanish fairly well. It was not common for that time and for my area. A family was buying groceries, and as I was ringing up the items, the father said he has not seen the stuff on the bottom, don't get it. I rang up what was on the belt, and sat there. After a few moments I asked about the stuff on the bottom. They would not look at me for the next 2 minutes or so of the transaction. Employees at the Asian market don't think I know Mandarin. They talk some mad shit about everyone shopping there, and they some racists MFs. I hear watch the black ones, they steal quite often and they comment on people's weight a lot. My great-grandmother, great-grandma and grandma were in an elevator. Two women started speaking in Yiddish, "Oh look at the poor washerwoman." As my great-grandmother got off, she turned and said, "I can understand everything you said. Be nice." Hard to describe, but I thought it was adorable. I was at a weekend retreat for people studying sign language. It was held at a residential school for the deaf and the children were away at home, but a few teenagers were hanging around. A couple of the teen boys were trying to flirt with a girl. I wasn't paying close attention, and I'm not fluent anyway, but I could tell one boy was asking the other boy to talk to the girl for him, probably because he was too shy to talk to her himself. Finally I oversaw, the boy ask her, "What is your weight?" The girl looked confused and a little disgusted. He repeated the question. The first boy slapped the second boy's hands away and emphatically signed, "What is your name?" The girl was happy enough to answer that, and I was glad none of them could hear me laugh out loud. I speak Mandarin, heard some weird shit. I wouldn't marry you if you owned all the kittens in the world. Overheard in a restaurant was great. But I also speak some French, and while in Baltimore airport, I overheard a little girl, who was pointing at a huge ass praying mantis on the window and say, "It's not going to come on the airplane, is it?" Adorable. I'm half Korean, and can understand fluent Korean and can only respond in simple Korean, or I just respond in English. But I was eating by myself in a Korean restaurant and the servers were speaking Korean, literally shit-talking me. I just looked up at them as soon as they were talking among themselves about me, and they noticed and just dispersed/went separate ways. I've talked to other half-Korean folks I know and we've all talked about similar experiences of full Korean folks talking shit, all the while them not realizing we understand what they're saying. It's embarrassing. I'm Polish and live in England. I don't know why Poles never realize that there are so many of us there that they can't just speak about everyone in Polish because someone will understand. It happens quite often. I took a youth group to Six Flags. We had extra tickets from a couple of no-shows, so I decided to scalp them. A Korean family walked up and I made my pitch. They conferred together in Korean. I'm a white guy, but I lived in rural Korea for a year and bargained with a lot of shopkeepers, so I knew their counter offer and what they were willing to pay before they announced it in English. Used to teach in Korea in a fairly small town. Some kids I taught told me about their grandma. She saw a black man at the train station and muttered at him, in Korean, to go wash his skin. She, of course, assumed there was no way he spoke Korean, but he immediately answered back, in Korean, "Don't hate, grandmother." She was so shocked and embarrassed she just stood up and left the station. Took the afternoon train instead. Sometimes my students forget I speak Russian, and start saying stuff that is way inappropriate for English class. The best was when this one boy, who always finishes his work early and fidgets around with things, was pretending to swallow a pencil. Another boy, who thinks he's very funny, said in Russian, "I always knew you could deep throat." That kid turned a beautiful color when I reminded him I could understand. I'm from Hungary and I lived in Germany for a few years as an au pair. I was honestly surprised how many times I heard random Hungarians. They never said anything offensive or rude about others, just swore a lot, really loudly. Always made my day when I heard a random fucking fuck in my native language in Aldi. I almost never swear in English, a sad lack of variety, but when my friend visited after 6 months, and I could finally talk with someone from home, I did the exact same thing. Maybe it's a cultural thing. So not me but a friend of mine. So he is a manager in a kitchen, and when he got this sweet gig in a new kitchen it was like 90% Cuban women. Now my friend is straight up Irish, red hair, pale skin with freckles, green eyes, totally a white boy. His mother though was a Spanish teacher and raised him to speak fluent Castilian Spanish. Well, for his first 2 weeks the ladies talked a lot of smack about him in Spanish to each other and totally dissed him non-stop. He decided to let it roll, and when the 2 weeks was up he held a big meeting with them all to go over the changes he was gonna make. He held the whole meeting in Spanish and he said every woman's face just dropped and went bright red. LOL. Needless to say they stopped talking smack in Spanish. Strangers in my city. They were German and I am half German half Italian. I live in Italy, guys, and they asked me in English where they had to go to reach the city center. I told them where, in English again, and then put my headphones on, but I could hear them say, "Look, I told you not every young person is bad." For example, this girl, she could have ignored us, but she helped us. In German, they were an old couple. I love these two. I started dating a girl and decided I'd learn her language, Punjabi, but I obviously didn't tell her because I wanted to keep it a surprise. Anyways, that's how I found out she was cheating on me, because I overheard her conversation with her friend. 8 months of effort gone in vain. That guy is a fucking idiot. I was washing my hands. This is what the two of them basically did, posture and all. In high school, I spent a month in Germany as an exchange student. The family had a son my age. Everyone I met commented on the fact that they had never met an American who could speak German. Until they met me. One night, shortly after I arrived, I was at a party. Two girls about my age sat down close to me and started talking. I tried to look oblivious. Girl 1, in German, isn't that the American boy staying with Peter? Girl 2, German, yes. He's rather cute, yes. Girl 1, German, yes. I'm going to say something. Girl 1, English, hey. Aren't you the American staying with Peter? I'm Birgit, and this is Hilda. Me, in German, yes, I am. It's nice to meet you both. They both turned bright red. It was one of the funnest trips I've ever had. I was eating at a restaurant in Quebec where seriously everyone speaks at least some English who isn't super old, and a couple who only spoke English sat there and bitched about everyone around them as if no one could understand a word they were saying. It was crazy because we were speaking English, albeit not so obnoxiously loud as to draw everyone's attention, as they were a couple of tables over. Anyways, it was embarrassing for them at first. Then downright terrible, as they even made fun of their waitress right in front of her. Eventually a manager came out and basically told them to fuck off. But as they went, people were commenting loudly in English, and I'm surprised people didn't actually clap. Not me, but a teacher of mine. Teacher, who spoke both fluent French and fluent German, was on a horse-drawn tour of a city, sitting in the center row of the carriage. A French couple sat in the rear row, and a German couple with small children sat in the front. The children were tired and cold and making a small fuss, but nothing outrageous. The French couple started insulting the parents and children in French, snidely. The German family didn't speak French and had no idea what was going on, trying to soothe their children and enjoy the ride. Teacher scolds the French couple in French, saying something along the lines of, "If you two bitter people ever manage to hold this relationship together, you'll likely be in the same situation one day. Show some decorum." Teacher then turned to German couple and, in German, reiterated what the French were saying about them and what he said in return. The German couple asked him to convey their apologies. Their hotel room wasn't ready and the children hadn't eaten yet, and they were killing time until they could check in. That they were sorry for disrupting their evening. Teacher did. French couple looked embarrassed. Teacher spent the rest of the evening visiting with the German family in German. At 17, just after I got my driver's license, my dad allowed me to take his car. I was on my way to pick up my friends so we could go see a movie. I had a green light, was moving through the intersection, and was hit by a car running a red light. I hit my head, was confused and scared, and was incapable of moving. The accident took place less than 5 minutes from a hospital, so I was packed up in an ambulance before I could think straight. I was in the same ambulance as the woman who hit me that was screaming about the pain in her knee. In the hospital we are wheeled into the same room and separated by a curtain. She called her family, speaking in Spanish, and told them to come to the hospital. A nurse gave me my phone and told me to call a parent. So I called my dad to come. Her family arrived first. I only took 1 year of Spanish and, while I couldn't follow the conversation, I could tell they were talking about me. My dad arrived then. He's completely fluent in Spanish, though you wouldn't know it from looking at him. And, after hearing the other family's conversation, he became enraged and began recording it on his phone. The gist of the conversation was this. The woman that ran the red light knew she was in the wrong but didn't have insurance. I was a young white girl rich enough to have a car. The police would believe her, the middle-aged woman, if she claimed I ran the red light. When the police arrived to take statements, they went to the woman first, as the medical staff had already finished with her. In between the plan hatching, she'd been screaming about how her knee hurt and the pain pills the nurses tried to give her were too big to swallow. I'd just been quiet and undemanding and simply answered questions asked of me and complied with any requests. Then they came to talk to me. My dad asked if either officer could speak Spanish. One did, so my dad played the recording. She got the ticket. The report stated she was at fault and I was not. And yet she still tried to sue me for her medical bills and the damage to her car. My mom was a secretary at a law office, and her boss was kind enough to write her a letter full of legalese saying I'd countersue if she continued to harass me, and I had the police report stating she was at fault. It was an interesting few months. Edit. Couple of spelling/grammar mishaps. American who works abroad. It always baffles me how some American tourists seem to think that nobody else in the world speaks English. The one that comes to mind was at a train stop where some tourists who were clearly American were talking about how smelly everyone in the country was. Tourist A mentioned that tourist B should keep her voice down, and tourist B replied, "Why? None of them know what I'm saying." A guy standing behind them piped up with something like, "Pretty much all of us speak English." The tourists' faces dropped and they were silent until the train came. It was excellent. This was in Argentina, for those asking. Very innocent comment towards my dad, but regardless they clearly didn't think I could understand them. I once overheard some middle-aged guys say that my dad looks like the oldest kid from the Brady Bunch if he grew up in Spanish. My dad was down the aisle getting something and I was manning the cart and they were semi-near me. I just start laughing because my mom had a crush on Greg from the Brady Bunch as a kid, so it was perfect. Even my dad's name is Greg. No one was offended, but the guys did look scared for a minute. All the Mexicans at work insult my white ass every fucking day. They still don't know I can understand them. I used to be the manager at a hostel in Kingston, Jamaica about 3 years ago. I speak English, Spanish and understand German, Portuguese, Italian, and French somewhat well enough to get the context. They would often talk negatively around the front desk before checking in about the locals and would say extremely disgusting racist things and would generalize about my fellow compatriots. "I'm a local, but due to my Hispanic background I look Latino. Jamaicans are so lazy, these N-words are always trying to charge us more because we are tourists. This country is a complete shithole and backward, no one here is educated. Since I had the right to refuse admission even if they had a booking, I would cancel their reservation and explain to them that it was due to the racist things they were saying. I was kind enough to issue a refund to these atrocious persons. The owner of the hostel would back me up and say people like that shouldn't stay here anyway. I work in the utility industry. I had a guy I was working with trying to get new service to his residence. During one of our meetings he was on his cell phone when I got there. He continued talking for a few minutes, then said something along the lines of "I've got to go, that stupid ass white boy is here." He was laughing on the phone, then looked at me. The look on my face must have told him I understood everything he said, because he got stone sober professional. When I was 13 my family moved to Switzerland. At first I didn't understand French at all, but slowly I began to learn. My classmates didn't realize I was learning though, so I got to hear them discreetly argue about who had to sit next to me, or who had to put me on their team in gym. Sad face. I'll just say, as someone that knows sign language, I can eavesdrop from across the room. The other thing is deaf people don't have the same social political correctness. If they want to say that they saw someone undo their pants, they will undo their pants to show what they want to convey even in public. So I see a guy telling some others, in sign language, about someone commenting on his button-fly jeans. He is standing in the corner of a coffee shop when he grabs his button-fly and pulls it open. People around the room gasp in shock with WTF type comments. I was able to get the lead up to the fly show, and he was talking about how someone asked how he undid all those buttons so quick. I was sitting in an Uber pool. Two Korean guys from a music school were in the back seat while I was in the front. They were discussing sex at first, but then they started talking about women in a super disparaging way. Things like, you have to try a white girl at least once, they're different, if you just play music for them they'll take their clothes off, except the rated R version. The Uber algorithm decided I should be dropped off first. The one asked his friend, "Where are we going?" in Korean. I answered in English, "He's dropping me off first." They said "Oh," in unison, then quickly changed the subject to "Hey, have you eaten yet, LMAO?" So once when I used to work at GameStop and this lady and her older mother walked in and they started to speak Spanish to each other looking for a game that the lady's son wanted for Christmas. They eventually find it and then they come to the register, and this is where the fun begins. Now I do speak fluent Spanish, but because of a recent work incident I didn't speak Spanish to people unless they asked me to. So this lady and her mother are trying to gather their dollars together, and while they're gathering the money I asked them if they wanted to add insurance onto their game for $3, and the lady looks up and says yes, and then resumes to look for more money, and then they finally get together the original $11 that it cost to buy the game, but we're surprised to when it said $14 on the screen. The mother of the child asked why it went up to $14, and I said because of the insurance for the game. The lady then says I don't want the insurance. The lady's mother then asked why it jumped up, and her daughter said he added insurance without telling me in Spanish. Then her mother proceeds to say, "Wow, he's just trying to take advantage of people for not speaking his language." This, ladies and gentlemen, is where I lost and went full Spanish speaking mode and explained to both of them what was going on, and they both apologized and they paid for the insurance and didn't say a word for the rest of the transaction. Well, as an Italian I overheard many American tourists diss my town, the service workers and many other things. But the most fun I had was abroad when two thugs talked shit about me and my father in our face, even with sporadic eye contact, in a bastardized second-generation immigrant-esque version of Italian while we were touring NYC. Boy did they look surprised. French, English, German and Spanish. Have had some fun ones with the latter too. Once, German tourists were in town, talking about how North Americans are rude and dumb. I politely responded to them that generalizing all North Americans is dumb, and saying things like that was very rude. That shut them up. In Spanish, I was out with my partner, and a group of Spanish-speaking boys started saying things about my partner that while I understand why they'd think them, you shouldn't say out loud, and what they'd do to her. I responded that this is what I thought of their mothers as I was having them the night before. Once again, triumphant silence and indignant shock was their reaction. The best polyglot story ever was my godmother, who is this white-ass French Canadian who was raised in India, and speaks fluent Hindi and Marathi. So these two guys in an elevator start talking about her physique, berating her for being on the plumper side. As she exits the elevator, she says in fluent Hindi how their mums would not approve of how they were talking and treating women. Kind of the reverse situation. My best friend lives in America with me, but was born and raised in China. When he first came to America, he went to NYC for a few days with a tourist group. For background, the Mandarin word for that is which happens to sound quite a bit like the N-word. Well, at one point, my friend was walking down the street with one of his friends from China speaking Mandarin and was pointing some things out and, rather loudly, said that, and that. Luckily the people who were about to punch him realized pretty quickly how poor his English was at that point. I used to work at a name brand retail store. This attracts a lot of Chinese clients as Chinese people are really big on name brand products. Most of our Chinese clients are tourists or people who've moved to the US later in life and don't speak that well and prefer to speak in Chinese. I hate dealing with actual Chinese clients because their manners are usually not the best, and once they know you speak Chinese they start demanding lots of stuff from you. So at work, I avoided speaking Chinese as much as possible, leading to me to insulted many times by them thinking I don't understand. I've been called all kinds of profanities and blamed for cheaping them out and not giving them better prices or free stuff. This is a retail store, not the street market. I usually don't confront these people, but one time this older lady in her 70s yelled "hurry up" to my face in Chinese. Her daughter turns to her and told her even if you tell her to hurry up she can't understand you. Only reason why it was taking longer than usual was because she wanted me to individually wrap everything she bought. So I decided to take my time, give her the shopping bag and said, which is a formal greeting Chinese people use when people are leaving their house/store. I'll never forget the old lady's face when I said that. I remember hearing two Chinese tourists, both males in their late teens/early 20s, in the United States talking about a woman they thought was attractive. Nothing overly inappropriate or rude, it was just kind of funny they were discussing it so loudly. On the tram in Munich I heard some drunk American tourist talking about how she didn't realize some guy had left a condom inside her for a few days. I didn't have the heart to tell her that like 90% of the people there could understand her.